I have got a weird one. If anyone knows what worked for agriculture in Iraq means, please let me know. Be me. In college through the 2000s era, Mom is a big shot professor. As a result, I am a uni brat. Hung around as a kid helping out. Teenager in various psych studies for side apartment, family friends. Spent 8 years at the uni for undergrad and grad school, even though they begged me to apply to a more prestigious uni. What I'm saying is that I love my college. It is a second home to me. So I helped out. We had a certain VIP that loved being on campus. Let's call him the Arab. First and last names are palindromes of each other. Even weirder, it is just letter plus AA, letter plus AA plus letter. The dean is afraid of this guy, so is my boss in IT. The Arab asked my boss to help him write an email. He is notoriously bad with technology, and he has some crazy emails in his contact list. I am talking entire categories of mostly past and a few, for the 2000s anyway, still elected, including a young Barack Obama in Chicago. This guy adopts orphans as kids and sends them to our med school after he ships them to boarding school. He has done this for 7 men and women now, all wonderful people. He also bought a historical train museum so he could live in it, and spends his time running the little train people can get rides on. One of his sons runs the museum. He failed out of med school, and the staff was paid really well. All of the profits that the museum makes during Eid, the staff gets in bonuses. He also loves building new buildings on campus. He is even so humble, he just wants his name on the bricks, so the uni can name the building after someone for money. He is a wonderful guy, right? That is what everyone thought, that he is a gentle soul. So the dean comes up to me and says, special assignment. I am now attached to the Arab permanently whenever he is here or on call. They will pay me double during these times. Of course I accept. Making bank, helping out the town saint. Before you get any ideas, the guy really was as nice to me in private as he was in public. He was really insistent on fixing how I dress and how I act. Bought me really nice work clothes and really unusual amulets and beaded wrist wraps made out of jade and onyx. I don't know what kind of religion he belonged to, because he hated Abrahamic symbols, yet loved Christmas, but he was devout and it felt Christianish. In time, he was a friend and mentor, and he was a lonely man. His wife had passed long ago. The first couple of years were amazing. We met Bill Clinton's former Secretary of Defense. They smiled and chatted and caught up. Yeah, if you haven't figured this out yet, he knows practically everybody in the government. Part of my job was securing box seats for him at every major speaker invitation so he could meet them and chat, and get pics of him and the person, and note down ideas for thank you emails and such, and set up gift reminders and stuff. The Arab was functionally, technologically illiterate. One night, he asks about my childhood. I tell him and he laughs. He is delighted because he lived in a hotel near where I grew up for a few years. Only problem is, the hotel is a 5-star one. I used to stand on the beach and point at it and promise my parents that someday we will go on a vacation and stay in a place like that when I have a career. I told him that, and he looked sad and said his company paid for it and to be careful about wanting things like that. One night, during a warm summer, he became what I can only describe as melancholic. He said he lost his wife, assistant that I remind him of, and most of his staff all in one night. Said someone had planted bombs at his agricultural business in Iraq in his office. He stood outside, talking with some guards when they went off. He was evacuated by the guards, and his remaining staff were lost to bandits who broke in and machine-gunned the entire staff. The thing is, this happened during the Hussein era. I've asked other Iraqis, and they've said it was an incredibly safe time, and that the story is very unusual. Another one. A few years later, I meet a professor through my mom. Cool dude, double doctorate, lieutenant colonel. Guy was a fucking badass in Nam. had a bunch of shit still in him from some op behind the lines in Lithuania of all places. Said he had to kill a guy, and as he rounded the corner, the guy jumped out from behind some trash with a Makarov and put a round into his chest, and his buddies had to drag his ass back to the US Embassy. Showed me all of the shrapnel wounds, and this very badass photo of him as a junior officer carrying an MA Deuce with his first platoon he ever commanded. He was always very honest with me about his life, and said he volunteered for any cloak and dagger shit because he got off on it so hard. He was notorious for ops going sideways and living through it. His back got messed up pretty badly because a helicopter crashed, and he had to crawl back to base with survivors in Asia somewhere. Entire office filled with pictures of him getting medals pinned, in the shit, shaking hands, very cool stuff. One day, I'm helping him out, trying to build his class for him, and I asked what working in an agricultural business in the Middle East means. He got really quiet and scary, and this old hunchback man loomed in front of me with the most pissed off expression I have ever seen. Put his face practically against mine and said, "Stay the fuck away from him." Things were never quite the same between us after that. Still an awesome dude. Another one. 15 years later, I work for a very cool corporation now. We get a new head of security. CEO said he pulled some strings, and we are getting him, end of story. He is a really charming dude, and talks about safety procedures and drills non-stop. I ask him what he does. I guarded crops in Iraq, did a lot of agricultural work. I ask him about that phrase, and I say I knew somebody else who used to say that that was his job, and he had a lot of weird stories. The guy joked, and said he has a lot of weird stories too, and to treasure them. I told him the Arab's name, and he smiled, and said his mentor talked about him when he was first in the service, and I am very lucky to have had him in my life. Another one. The Arab had a strange quirk on top of other strange quirks. He made me Photoshop him as pale as possible whenever we would get these handshakes with VIPs. Probably the only time I'd ever seen him get agitated. He would just stand behind my chair screaming, "Whiter, whiter," over and over until I was making him practically a ghost, and only then he would be happy. I got a nice vacation out of him once. We drove up to DC. I had to prep a laptop and a PowerPoint for him. PowerPoint was completely innocuous. It was about a charity drive that he was doing to build a monument for vets killed in the Middle East. He offered to put me and my girlfriend up in DC if we agreed to sleep in separate rooms, and if I'd come along and make sure his laptop was 100% working with the presentation. I get there. He drops me off a little ways away from the Capitol at the Trump Hotel and tells me to have fun, and he is meeting old friends and will be unavailable. Really nice guy. Said I did an amazing job and started crying and talking about how everyone will be remembered now, and gave me a really odd shaped bracelet made out of black pearls. The saddest part was his death. Someone had broken into the museum, tied him to a chair, destroyed all of the security and VRs with probably a sledgehammer, took the hard drives, and just sliced the old man open. The officers that moonlighted as campus guards said it looked like it was a robbery. Whole museum was ransacked. Town did a memorial for him. Museum is gone now. His family sold off all of the items and the old mansion. The Arab could have been associated with the Ministry of Agriculture or medicinal base ingredient industry, which there is tons of money in, while a lot of stuff is made in factory laboratories now. Some things are dependent on ingredients that can only be sourced biologically, or are difficult to replicate in a lab, or get the same quality or results from lab-made compounds or substitutes, and some things may not grow outside of certain controlled environments or certain regions of the world. Or to simplify, rare herbs business, which there is a large market for with the medical industry here in Denmark, as well as other places like Singapore, Malaysia, Qatar, Oman, the UAE, Bahrain, Kuwait, Switzerland, South Korea, Japan. With the medical industries of the Singapore, South Korea, Malaysia, Denmark, where I live, as well as certain countries in the Middle East, being world leaders in the field. The reason I suspect his involvement in those industries has to do with his grooming of future medical professionals and pushing for their education in that field, combined with claiming to work agriculture in Iraq, large sums of money, a staff of his own. And if there is a connection with needing military professionals and that one story about guarding fields in Iraq is taken into account, I will say he is in the medical industry as a source for sought-after base ingredients needed in the medical industry. I understand. Thanks for explaining it to me, friend. The military veteran in the story was probably responsible for that attack in which the rich guy lost his wife. Ah, no problem. Had not made the connection between the attack and the veteran myself. If that is the case, pharmaceutical companies may have possibly lobbied or been willing to offer a desk of directors or other high-value position in exchange for an attack on the Arabs' business in order to possibly wipe out an industry rival or take over an industry sector, as has been the case in other industries in the wars following the Saddam regime's fall. The problem with this is this story takes place before that, as a number of previously in control of local business ended up in Israeli and US businesses' hands, or ended up with vacuums which were filled by us and or Israeli companies, such as oil fields, mines, and other raw goods. A more likely option is industrial sabotage, to weaken the regime in Iraq, or their economy, which was not and is still not uncommon with officials who voted in favor of, or other government or military people involved who pushed for it, or decided its necessity in the past, having received payments, or having bought stocks related to the attacked industries, or companies who stood to gain, or who gained from the OPs in the period afterwards, some even gaining high positions there. I grew up in Ohio in the 70s, and me and my childhood friend Joe were outside all the time. We could manage it. Joe lived on a farm that bordered a pretty big forest, and my parents would drop me off in the morning, and we would stay in the woods all weekend. We would only come out for school. We loved pretending we were frontiermen. We would build shelters, traps, practice making fire with sticks, the whole 9 yards. When we got to be in high school, we got this notion to pull a Stand By Me. This was based on the movie of the same name that had just come out. The idea was that we would walk the railroad tracks out in the country, but instead of looking for a dead body, we would find cool bridges to fish from and camp a little ways off the tracks. Of course, we knew this was dangerous and we would likely be trespassing, but we were kids. We had a lot of fun. We did find beautiful rivers. We discovered bridges no one went to. We fished. We hid from trains. At night, we camped in woods just near the tracks and made small hidden fires. Nothing bad ever happened. It was idyllic. In fact, it was so fun, we did it multiple times. Never had a problem. After high school, me and Joe went our own ways. We both left home, but always stayed in touch, and always tried to coordinate visits so we would see each other occasionally. Well, one summer in the mid-90s, it worked out that we were both in town for about a week. We'd do stuff with family in the day, and at night, we would either catch drinks at a bar or sit outside Joe's house around a fire and talk about the old days. One night, me and Joe got to talking about our Stand By Me trips. Well, nostalgia and beer are a hell of a mix. Soon, we decided to take a day, walk the rails, camp one night, and walk home. The day came. We started out early morning. We had my wife drop us off in our old spot where we used to start, right outside our hometown. She thought this was absolutely crazy and made sure to mention it. When she pulled away, Joe suggested that instead of walking the usual route, we would take the opposite direction just to be adventurous. We knew the land well. We had a map, so I gave a "what the hell," and off we set. The day went fine. It was fun and a little sad, but in a good way. We found a bridge and sat on the edge, smoked a joint, and moved on. We had no fishing gear, but we brought some canned food and other stuff. Before night started to set in, we picked a spot to camp. It was a thick, forested area, trees on every side of the train tracks, so you felt like you were in a tunnel. We had brought small hammocks to sleep on, but before we set them up, we decided to do a little scouting of the perimeter. Now, this is what we used to do in the old days too. We would walk the area around a little bit to make sure some dude's house was not just over a hill, and we were actually camping in their yard. We walked maybe 100 or so feet into the woods and up a small incline. We figured if we did not see anything from on top of this short hill, we would be fine. But when we got to the top, we saw an old building down at the bottom, about 100 yards into the woods. It was barely visible. We both pondered over what to do. We both assumed it was a sugar shack or something, because there did not appear to be a clear road from it. From where we were, there did not look to be anyone in it either. All was quiet. No movement could be seen. No lights. We decided to walk a little closer just to make sure. We came down the hill very slowly, and as we neared the building, we saw it was not a sugar shack at all. It was an old church. It looked like it had been abandoned for years. It was a squat, sagging building whose wooden planks were almost black from years of moss and rot. A cross still stood on top of the place, also weathered black. None of the windows had glass, and there were no doors, just open doorways. We got close enough to see inside. There were rows of pews and a built-up section in front for a preacher to stand. We did not go all the way in. We did not want to. Beyond all that, there was no sign of anyone else. No footprints, no paths, no roads. It was a completely abandoned church. We left immediately and went back up the hill to our spot we had picked to camp. Having a hill between us and the church made us feel better, but we were still a little uneasy. We chalked it up to the natural creepiness seeing a church in the middle of the woods would elicit. Besides, at this point it was dusk, and we just decided to rig up our hammocks and go to sleep, and move on at early morning. Night set in, and as we lay in our hammocks and shot the shit, we began to hear something in the direction of the church. Our conversation about it went a little like this. Do you hear that? What the fuck is that? It sounds like people singing. And it did sound just like singing. We both slid right out of our hammocks and hunkered down, straining to hear more. We listened for a minute or two, and the singing continued, but it was not getting louder. Finally, we decided to creep back up the hill and see if we could spy where the sound was coming from. We could still move very quietly in the woods from the old days. It was second nature to us. The moon was barely out, but it provided enough light so you would not walk right into a tree. But it was near pitch black. We did not use flashlights as we crept slowly up the hill, and we did not talk. When we got to the top, we saw light in the distance. It was coming from the church, and the singing was coming from inside. Joe and I put our heads close together and had a hushed conversation that boiled down to, can you believe this shit? The light looked to be candlelight from the way it flickered, and though we tried, we could not make out what was being sung. It sounded like church music, but in another language. We sat and watched for a while, trying to see who was in there, but we only saw occasional shadows. We had no intention of getting closer either. We had about a football field length between us and it, and we aimed to keep it that way. The singing continued for a bit, and then it stopped. After that, a booming male voice began to chant. I was already freaked out, but this voice thoroughly scared the shit out of me. It sounded like some Old Testament preacher you see in the movies, but again, it was like he was speaking in a different language because we could not understand a single word. Eventually, it got to where the single male voice would say something, and then a bunch of voices would answer in song. This lasted for a while, and then they all broke into this long, sustained wail that just kept getting louder. It got so loud and so disturbing that it covered my ears. Then it stopped. At this point, I was just getting ready to say, let's get the fuck out of here, when Joe put a hand on my shoulder and hissed, they are coming out. We were far enough away that we could not make them out really well, but what we could see was a line of figures walk out the open doorway, all holding hands in single file. We could see some of them had flashlights. They began to sing again, and the light from the flashlights began to move toward us and the hill. We booked it back down to our campsite, grabbed our shit, and ran to the tracks. Once there, we ran down the tracks in the direction we had come from. After a few minutes, we stopped and looked back. We saw lights coming down the hill. They were moving erratically, like whoever was holding them was shaking them. We continued to run in spurts and walk as fast as we could. We eventually stopped seeing the lights and came to a road. By our map, we knew a small town was about 15 minutes down it, and we walked there, got to a 24-hour gas station, and called my wife to come and get us. My wife and other friends all just thought it was kids messing around, but I heard those voices, and they sure as hell did not sound like little kids to me. Not sure who those people were, but it was definitely the creepiest thing that happened to me out in the woods. Hey, I hope you've enjoyed the story so far. If you do and you want to hear more, please leave a like and subscribe to my channel, and leave a comment down below, as it lets the algorithm know that you like my content and it promotes it to more people. My goal for the channel is to hit 50,000 subscribers, and we're closing in fast, so thank you, and back to the stories. My boyfriend's uncle used to be a guard at this old prison. Has since been closed down in the late 70s to mid 80s. He had a few experiences of his own, and also heard of some others. One dude is put in solitary confinement for the night, not because he had been doing something wrong, but because the lock on his door had stopped working, and they needed somewhere to put him fast. It is about 2:30 in the morning. BF's uncle is just doing his usual rounds. Suddenly, the guy in the SC cell starts screaming, calling out for help and to be let out of there, loud enough they can hear him through the soundproof door. BF's uncle and another guard open up to see what the problem is. Guy is as white as a sheet, shaking. They eventually calm him down and ask him what the fuck happened. He says this guy just appeared in his room and sat down on the bed and started to have a conversation with him. Introduced himself. Inmate does not know this, but the man he claims to have spoken to is actually a former inmate who was hung there around 100 years earlier. He's buried literally on the other side of the wall to the SC cell. This happens several times to people who are sent to that SC cell. They eventually have to stop using it, and when someone acts up, they are sent to one in another wing. I have more if people are interested. This one inmate's wife visits him every weekend for the 12 years that he has been in there. Gets sick with stomach cancer, starts to come less and less often. Eventually, she does not come at all. Her sister calls the prison and says that she is in hospital, probably only a month left at the most. One night, boyfriend's uncle is doing his rounds again. Hears a man talking to a woman in his room. Listens for a few minutes to make sure he is definitely not hearing things. Opens the slat on the guy's door up and turns the light on, only the one guy in there. Asks him who he was talking to. He says, my wife. BF's uncle just assumes the dude was doing impressions or something and leaves it alone. Next morning, prison gets another call from the woman's sister. Turns out, she died at around 8 o'clock the night before. Wife of the inmate who was supposedly talking to his wife the night before. The prison counselor takes him in to tell him, and apparently when he heard, he just said, I know. Guards would hear him talking to his wife quite often after that, and it was around then that people, guards and inmates, started to talk about seeing a woman in a casual dress wander around that particular wing. Not my boyfriend's uncle's story, but he was there on the day, and it is confirmed by a bunch of other people. Be about 7 a.m. None of the inmates are out of their cells yet. Guard watching the security cameras says there is someone out in the yard by the wall, dressed somewhat like an inmate. They can't tell if it's one that got out or somehow a civilian who got in. Radios a couple of guards nearby, says the guy is down there. They go to investigate. Call the guy back once they are down there because no one is there. Guard watching can still see the guy on camera along with the guards, tells them this. Guards are adamant that there is fucking no one there. They go into the security area to see for themselves. Definitely a guy there, just standing with his head down. He eventually just fades out. There is still a tape around somewhere. This is the scariest paranormal thing to happen to me so far. Actually, I just posted this on another site because I try hard to forget it. Now that I remembered, I am back to searching for answers. Anyway, I suffered nightmares and night terrors for years prior to this, and for years after. I say this because I know what they feel like, and when the paralysis begins. I was about 15 at the time that this occurred, maybe younger. One night, I woke up out of the blue, around 2 a.m. I was so wide awake, it was as if I never fell asleep. I lied in my bed for a while, furious, because I had to wake up early for school, and I was not feeling tired at all. I suddenly felt tingling, like touching those electric ball things spread across my body. This is usually the first sign of sleep paralysis for me, and I bolted upright to keep it from occurring, pinching myself as I did so. There was a thin wall between my brother's room and my room. From that wall came a young female voice, no older than 8 years old, asking, "Cousin, cousin, are you there?" Immediate terror, let me tell you. I dove under my covers, because we all know blankets save us from everything, and listened. Another voice, younger sounding and female also, was practically shouting, "Cousin, cousin." I started to rationalize that my brother must have left his TV on. He always had the damn thing turned up loud, and the TV was right against the wall. The original voice responded to the younger one, saying, "I don't think cousin is here," and it sounded pretty sad about it. As I am shaking with fear and damn near pissing myself, a third voice pops up. This one sounds even younger, like a 4-year-old trying to sound older as she shushed her friends. "Shh, the one on the bottom is awake." That was the last straw for me. All 3 voices started giggling from the fucking wall. I shared the bedroom with my little sister, and she slept on the top of the bunk bed. I was on the bottom, and they knew I was awake. The laughing stopped eventually, and it seemed like hours went by. I had gone through every rationalization before finally telling myself it just had to be the TV. I rolled over and uncovered my head, though I kept the blanket close. There was no sleeping. I felt like I drank a shit ton of coffee all at once, and I kept expecting to hear something else. I finally got my eyes to close when I felt that weird tingling on my shoulder. My eyes were instantly open, but I did not see anything. It just felt like there was something kneeling next to my bed. A little voice whispered inches from my ear, "Don't worry, we won't hurt you." I was not tired at all prior to this, but I found myself falling asleep. It was the last thing I remember hearing before, bam, it was morning. Fucking freaks me out to this day, and I have no explanation for it. I worked for the US Census Bureau. When I reached a certain apartment, a raspy voice answered from the other side. He opened the door. The lights were off. He sat me down for the survey interview, and only then did I realize this man was wearing a white t-shirt and boxer briefs. He began telling me about his life and how problematic it was, and began to talk about experiences with heroin and meth. I kept quiet, listening closely. He soon threatened my life. He then did it again, maybe a few more times before he forgot who he was talking to. I tried to leave after 25 minutes. He blocks the door. This man is 65 years old, but has the eyes of 100, decrepit and dead. He finally suggests that we finish the interview. After talking about his taxes for a while, we get to the final question, the phone number. He tells me a 6-digit number 3 times, all of which contained 666 in there somewhere. When that did not work, he said, "Hold on, I'll go get it from my fridge." He walked down the hallway that contained a closet that he had mentioned had a gun in it. I stood up, shouted, "I'm going to get Taco Bell," through his apartment, and left. I sprinted to my car. Good fun.